things for proper needs.
It's a small business.
Yeah, but to go and look for money to go backpacking from somebody else. I mean, I've spent time backpacking, and I spent 6 months in Africa when I was much younger, and doing it very, very cheaply. And part of the reward of doing that is actually the feeling that you're doing it by yourself, and it's getting there and earning it and taking responsibility. So to turn around and ask somebody for the money to go travelling,
yeah, but Mike, unlike Leonie here, these two, they share their experiences with hundreds of thousands of followers. So through their eyes, you get to experience Africa. Isn't that worth something in terms of monetary donation?
No.
I do. Look, when I first went to travel, I wrote to newspapers and magazines all over the place and said, I'm going to X and Y. Would you like me to write on it, write for you and send you an article? And funnily enough, given I had no background in it, I wasn't a journalist and hadn't written anything before, none of them took me up on that offer. But actually, if they can parlay their 200,000 or 300,000 people into advertising, that's a different thing. But to ask, it just beggars my mind. I don't understand why. How this works.
Well, because this is a small business of theirs. They're young entrepreneurs. They've found a way to travel the world by saying to people, look, we can give you knowledge of Africa via our Instagram feed.
Well, in which case,
pay for $7 a month, and we can give you our Germanic take on Africa.
Well, in fact, in which case that's slightly different in a way. That's a bit like them writing a travel guide, and in the old days we used to publish it, and nowadays they're doing it digitally. So maybe I've been unfair.
Right. Okay, on an anti-small business take there, you've been great, Leonie Freeman and Michael Moynihan. You've been wonderful. Thank you very much. I'm Wallace Chapman. See you tomorrow.
Te whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. On tonight's programme, the Prime Minister shuffles the deck chairs. Who's moving up, down and sideways? Here's a clue. It's a gut job for Kiwi Build and housing. MPs line up to filibuster the final version of David Seymour's Euthanasia bill. And the parting gift for Treasury Secretary Gabriel McLoof, one high-level dressing down on his last day. A photo of a drowned migrant family prompts the US to send more aid to the Mexican border. Victim Support hands out the last of the donated millions to mosque victims. And we have so many cute creatures tonight on the programme, little blue penguins and a geriatric monkey with alopecia. Not kidding.
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora ko Susana Leata tēnei. Phil Twyford has lost the housing portfolio in Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern's first substantive cabinet reshuffle. Megan Woods will take over the role, leading a new team of housing ministers and the Kiwi Build reset. Political reporter Yvette McCullough has more.
Ms Ardern says it's clear the housing crisis is too great for one minister and the government's housing program needs a fresh pair of eyes. As part of the reshuffle, Chris Faafoi has been promoted to a minister inside cabinet and will be part of the housing team, with a focus on public housing. Mr Twyford will be in charge of urban development, and he also picks up economic development. Mr Twyford says he gave his all to Kiwi Build, and he is as frustrated as anyone. He hasn't built as many houses as he hoped. Ms Wood says she'll be taking the recess to bring together a work program and to take over the Kiwi Build reset. From Parliament, Yvette McCullough.
Victims of the Christchurch terror attacks have been told how the remaining financial donations will be allocated. Final payments are going to 296 people in 4 categories, ranging from a $50,000 lump sum for victims next of kin to $5,000 to people who were in the mosques during the shootings but were uninjured. Victim Support met with victims and families today after some had spoken about the delay in receiving financial support. Its Chief Executive Kevin So says more than 900 people have sought financial support. But a hero of the Christchurch attacks who chased away the gunman from the Linwood Mosque says he's disappointed with Victim Support's approach of dividing the final sum of money. Abdul Aziz says many are unhappy with the categorising of the funds.
I'm very upset with them. I'm very upset. That's how they treat us. I just wanted to know, those people paying donation, for those sort of people, they should think twice before they're putting donation to the account of these people. Today there's 200 or 150 people here, and they're all upset.
Abdul Aziz says the 296 victims should have been paid the same as the victims with injuries and the bereaved. The National Party says the outgoing Treasury Secretary should offer his resignation or at least apologise. Gabriel McClouf's been publicly reprimanded by the State Services Commissioner for his handling of the budget hacking allegations, but won't be sanctioned. In the days before the budget, he claimed the Treasury website had been deliberately and systematically hacked. It was later revealed the National Party had used the site's search bar to find the budget documents. National's Deputy Leader Paula Bennett says Mr McClouf and the Finance Minister Grant Robertson should be held to account for not correcting claims of a hack earlier.
They were very quick to blame, very quick to bring in the police, but very slow to correct it when they knew mistakes had been made.
Paula Bennett says it's not about the actions of the National Party but government incompetence. The Department of Conservation has admitted it failed to properly assess the risk of the Cape Kidnappers track before a massive slip came down earlier this year. 2 Korean tourists were injured when the slip swept them out to sea. An internal investigation by the department has found the walk to the Gannet colony should never have been promoted as a Great Day walk, as it may have led some people to believe there was no risk. A DOC spokesperson, Steve Taylor, says its own risk assessment should have been much broader.
That we should have identified the recurring incidents of rockfall that have been occurring along the beach. Even though those areas are not within land administered by DOC, it still is part of the walk that people enjoy when they're visiting the colony.
Steve Taylor says the DOC section of the walk will remain closed until a complete risk analysis is completed. A mud pool which erupted in a residential area of Rotorua has tripled in size since it appeared earlier this week. The pool appeared in the back garden of Susan Jedda's Whakarewarewa home. Ms Jeddah, who has been staying with family, returned home today to find a much larger cauldron of mud threatened her garden shed.
The whole corner of the big double garage that's on the bank, it's like there's a big hole underneath that, so it's kind of a matter of time before that just will probably end up down the bank.
Rotorua resident Susan Gedger. The Rotorua Lakes Council has put up fences around the site, which is still bubbling and belching out mud and steam. A pilot was forced to make a rough landing after experiencing mechanical issues while flying near Lake Benmore this afternoon. A fire and emergency spokesperson says the small plane had a mechanical fault and landed safely above the Lake Benmore Holiday Park near State Highway 83. Emergency crews were sent to the scene and found the pilot uninjured. It's coming up to 5 minutes past 5. The Chiefs Super Rugby coach Colin Cooper has unexpectedly stepped down with a year still remaining on his contract. Cooper has been in charge of the Hamilton-based side for the past 2 seasons and has guided them to a quarterfinals each time. However, he has sought an early release from his job, saying the role of head coach has taken him away from his passion of hands-on coaching.
The job has been really consuming and it'll be good to go back, have a bit of a break, see my family and friends again.
Cooper says he'll take time out to consider his future. There's speculation he may look to become Ian Foster's assistant with the All Blacks should Foster be successful in replacing Steve Hansen as All Black head coach when he steps down after the World Cup. The Silver Ferns coach Nolene Taurua says tonight's game against the national men's netball team is ideal preparation for next month's World Cup in Liverpool. After a comfortable win over an all-stars side last night in Auckland, the Silver Ferns are expecting a much more physical contest tonight. Taurua says playing the men's team will prepare them for the physicality of Australia, the aerial flair of Jamaica and the unpredictability of Malawi.
It's a great opportunity, or the first opportunity for the men to be showcased on live TV. So they want to make sure that they put out a game that has high skill and speed, and then it's up to us to be able to counteract that and compete against the physical nature of the men.
Nolene Taurua. That's the news.
A hiccup for Hipkins. This was a full and final settlement, and they signed up to that. They knew full well that this would be it. If we were going to move, we were only going to move once.
A blow for the Black Caps. The pitch was turning like day 5 in Chennai, let alone the early summer at Edgbaston. It was an extraordinary surface that made it so difficult for run scoring.
And takeoff for New Zealand's space trackers.
We're a spacefaring nation, and other countries in this context, they're hugely excited by what New Zealand's doing, and many of them are very jealous about what New Zealand is doing.
Blast off with Morning Reports. Corin Dunn and Susie Ferguson, weekdays from 6.
Then on 9 to noon, the orphaned children of ISIS fighters are finally allowed to return to Australia. We speak to the campaigning grandmother's lawyer. And after 10, Kiwi singers, the Koi Boys, have an exciting new project back home. Join me, Lynn Freeman, and for Catherine Ryan on 9 to noon after Morning Report on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. Northland, Coromandel Peninsula and Great Barrier Island. Generally fine weather, however a few showers in the east. For the remainder of the North Island, fine weather, apart from areas of morning and evening low cloud or fog. Isolated showers in Auckland tonight. For Southland and Fiordland, cloudy periods with a few showers about the coast and fjords, clearing Southland from this evening. For the remainder of the South Island, fine for most areas, frost morning and night. However, a few areas of morning and evening low cloud or fog about some sheltered valleys and basins. Chatham Islands mostly cloudy, a chance of a light shower. You're with RNZ National, it's 8 minutes past 5.
Thanks, Susanna. This is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. A new team of ministers is tasked with renovating the government's housing program, including the beleaguered Kiwi Build policy. The Prime Minister announced the cabinet reshuffle this afternoon, admitting that the job was too big for one minister and the government had got things wrong. Her fix, Phil Twyford, is losing the housing portfolio to his ministerial colleague, Megan Woods, who will lead the new team and take charge of Kiwi Build. Mana MP Chris Faafoi has been promoted into Cabinet and will take responsibility for state housing and homelessness, while Phil Twyford will focus on urban development. Here's our political editor, Jane Patterson.
Housing was always going to be the focus of Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern's first reshuffle. In an acknowledgement of failures in certain areas of housing policy, Ms Ardern has appointed 3 ministers to tackle it, to be led by Megan Woods.
With Kiwi Build, we are attempting to do something that no government has done before. It has proven to be no small task, and one we know we must do better in. It has become clear to me that the range of challenges in fixing the housing crisis, and that includes planning reforms, affordable housing, transitional housing, public housing, chronic homelessness, and many issues, more than that, are actually too great for one minister.
Ms Ardern says this was not an admission Phil Twyford himself had failed.
No, it's an admission, though, that it was a huge job. It was a job too big for one minister, and it's an admission that we know we have got things wrong with Kiwi Build. We do want to bring in a fresh pair of eyes because we aren't giving up on the housing crisis. We know there's more work to do.
The Cabinet has been short one minister since the resignation of Claire Curran, a gap now filled by Chris Faafoi.
Chris has done an outstanding job as a minister outside of Cabinet since the start of the term. He is a trusted pair of hands and he is widely respected by both stakeholders and his colleagues.
As well as keeping the broadcasting portfolio, he'll become an Associate Minister of Housing and will take responsibility for public housing, including state housing and tackling homelessness. Mr Faafoi says he's well suited to those areas.
I grew up in a state house, so having that privilege of a state house has meant a lot for me and my family, so taking over that challenge is something that I'm looking forward to.
Another vacancy was left after the sacking of Meka Whaitiri, who's been replaced by Christchurch East MP Portal Williams, who'll become the Minister for the Community and Voluntary Sector. She too says that appointment reflects her background.
It's a sector I'm familiar with and I've spent 20 odd years in various roles, so I think I bring some strength, particularly around community health, mental health and my family violence experience, to really helping this government deliver on its wellbeing budget.
Jacinda Ardern explained why Meka Whaitiri had not been returned to the executive.
Look, I did say in the very beginning, of course, that I wasn't closing the door, and I haven't. However, my decision here in this reshuffle was that it wasn't the right time. I know Meka is doing work and continues to do work, to acknowledge some of the issues that led to the situation that we had with her being removed as a minister.
Phil Twyford declined interview requests but was asked about his own position as Housing Minister a few hours before the reshuffle announcement.
That's not a matter that I take a personal position on. We all serve at the pleasure of the Prime Minister, and I'm happy to be a member of the Prime Minister's Cabinet.
Phil Twyford will also pick up economic development from Cabinet colleague David Parker. Mr Parker will be focusing on trade and the challenging issue of water, which includes questions of ownership, which the Prime Minister says will be something that will ramp up in the coming months. Megan Woods also declined an interview request, but in a statement said she was looking forward to rolling up her sleeves and getting stuck into the housing portfolio, adding KiwiBuild isn't working the way the government wants, so it will be changed. From Parliament for Checkpoint, Jane Patterson.
And Jane joins us now. Jane, I'm just wondering, where is Phil Twyford and what have we heard from him in the wake of this reshuffle?
Well, the last thing we heard, Lisa, was him going into question time, where he did field some last questions, and a last question from Judith Collins, again around KiwiBuild and house sales. Haven't seen him since then, but he did issue a statement, and he echoes the Prime Minister's comments that efforts to tackle the national housing crisis are bigger than one person, and he looks forward to being part of a team. He also said he was as frustrated as anyone else that they hadn't been able to deliver as many KiwiBuild houses as they'd hoped, and he'd put his all into it. Now, what this change does is it shows the government's commitment to housing and the recognition that it is a big sprawling portfolio with many different elements, as you heard Ms Ardern reel off there in that package. But it also does allow Phil Twyford a dignified exit from the housing portfolio itself while still being part of that broader team. And of course, part of that is not having his name associated with KiwiBuild, which really just has so many problems and was acknowledged today as becoming a bit toxic really for the government in terms of the brand, and really looking to turn that around, and also in terms of the house. So because he's not the housing minister, he won't be coming up against Judith Collins, that has been a regular part of question time with her questioning him. That will now be Megan Woods, who the National Party may see as maybe a slightly harder target.
I know it's sort of been presented as kind of a soft exit, but how much of a come down is it for him? He keeps his ranking, but that's the flagship policy, isn't it? And he's still been stripped of it.
It is, and as I said, it could have been a lot worse for him. He could have been dumped from the team altogether. So I think Ms Ardern has recognised his expertise in this area, and as well as not wanting to lose this, I also think she doesn't want to humiliate one of her senior ministers and someone that she clearly has regard for. Putting a team around it certainly makes it easier for all of those individual ministers to focus on their particular areas. Chris Faafoi will look at state housing and homelessness. Now, urban development is still a very interesting portfolio that Mr Twyford will take specific responsibility for, because of course we hear from developers all the time about the problems with the Resource Management Act and how it really holds up house building. So ministers in the past have been unable to get the balance of environmental protections with, while at the same time removing red tape. So Mr Twyford will really be focusing on that. Now, the other part of this, of course, is the KiwiBuild reset paper that we have been waiting on now for 6 months. It was announced at the start of the year that they would be looking at changing that program. Ms Ardern said that now the explanation for the delay is that while Mr Twyford had done a lot of work on it, she really wanted to give Megan Woods and Chris Faafoi the opportunity to contribute to that paper. So basically they're going to have at least the 3 weeks recess that we're coming into before an expectation that they would come back to Cabinet with the final KiwiBuild and actually broader housing program reset paper. And in fact, it could be longer than that. So it could end up being a much more long-term reset than we had initially expected.
Thanks, Jane. That's our political editor, Jane Patterson, joining us there from Parliament. It is almost 16 minutes after 5 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Let us know what you think of that. Is a change of minister enough to shake things up with KiwiBuild? Do you have an issue with the policy, or was it just that the minister wasn't suited to the job? Text us on 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Victim Support is handing out the last $2.5 million to the victims of the Christchurch mosque shootings and the families of those who lost their lives. It comes on top of the $7 million it has already distributed in 2 previous payments. This time, it's taken a different approach, paying slightly more to the injured depending on whether they were shot or if they sustained more minor injuries. The bereaved, including widows with small children, will receive the most. And as with the previous payment, witnesses to the horrific events have also been paid, but much less than the bereaved or injured. Speaking to media a few minutes ago, Victim Support CEO Kevin So said he'd taken advice from medical, ethical and legal experts, but there were no international frameworks for distributing money in these circumstances.
It was clear that as a community they expected Victim Support to recognise that there should be different levels of payment. For the bereaved, those shot, the injured and those present at the time of the attacks. With the support of the police list, we are confident that 100% of the donated funds has gone to the victims. We start distributing the remaining funds tomorrow.
And that's Victim Support CEO Kevin So speaking a short time ago. Meanwhile, our reporter Conan Young and cameraman Stan McFerrier talked to the victims as they left their meeting with Victim Support earlier today.
One of those shot in the attack, Sheikh Rubal, was full of praise for the job Victim Support has done.
Thank you. I know that all the money is gathered from the public's donation, and upstairs I read a really nice message from a 8-year-old boy, and they have done some baking and they gathered those money and they just give to Victim Support. Wonderful. I think with this incident people came together and people's donation, everything. I know that my life will be not same as before, maybe it will take some, but this money will help me for my long-term recovery.
Ahmed Jahangir suffered a bullet to the shoulder in the shootings and says the money will definitely help.
I have lost my right hand for my life, and also I have got all my nerves got scattered, and I'm on high dosage of pain reliefs. This money, I don't know how long it will sustain to do, but definitely not throughout my life, but it will be a help.
Zachariah Tuian was the 51st victim, dying in hospital of his wounds 48 days after the attacks. His widow today made the point that the money raised would only go so far.
I was just doing this simple calculation with people the other day, because everyone's talking about 10 million, there's 10 million, But even if you just divide the 10 million by the 50, forget 51, 50 widows, regardless of how big the family is, 10 million is 200,000 each family. And this is just dividing by 50 people, families, is 200,000. And if you divide that, and let's say you want them to stretch it out for 5 years, that just comes about to 3,000 something per month, regardless of how many you have in your family. So that money, that 10 million, is being divided into widows, the bereaved family, as well as physically injured. So it's actually much lesser and lesser now. So, there's a whole lot of misunderstanding out there. 10 million, but look at how much that 10 million. We're not expecting to be provided for the rest of our lives or anything like that. But for some families, this is the reality.
And for people who've lost their main breadwinner, it has a real impact, doesn't it?
Yes, and I feel for them too. Yeah, but we're resilient, and whatever help we get, we're very thankful and grateful for it.
Today was not just about the money. Victims were presented with a bound book containing the many written tributes of members of the public, included with their flowers outside the 2 mosques and at the Wall of Flowers. It meant a lot to Jana Izzat, who lost her son in the attacks.
I love it. Thank you, New Zealand. Thank you so much.
What have they given you there?
It's every single word that people wrote to or my son, let's say, or to deceased people or injured people. So I love it. They put it in a book.
Wow.
Yeah.
I can tell that means a lot to you.
That means a lot. It means a lot. I'm very happy with it.
But not everybody was happy with today's announcement. Witnesses, many of whom are struggling to deal with the aftermath of the attacks, have again received a much smaller amount of money. Abdulaziz, who chased the alleged gunman away from the Linwood Mosque, has always said all 290 victims should be paid the same, and that paying some more and some less is only dividing the community. He says witnesses are often struggling to deal with mental trauma, but this hasn't been recognised by victim support, which has today only given them another $5,000 on top of the $12,000 they'd already received.
Victim is all victims. Outside wound you can see, you can treat and can get healed. But inside wound you cannot see, you cannot treat, takes long time to heal. And after all this problem they're putting on them, the division and things, well, psychologically they make it more disturbing and put more pressure on them, and the illness will go more higher and higher.
All eyes are now on the Christchurch Foundation to see how it will distribute the roughly $6 million it's raised through the You Are Us campaign. Kei Oto Tahi Aho, mō te hotaka o te ahi ahi, ko Karinyang tēnei.
Let's go to some of your feedback now. This is on the cabinet reshuffle that the Prime Minister announced. Phil Twyford has lost control of the Kiwi Build policy. Megan Woods is being brought in above him, and the housing policy is being divided up across basically 3 ministers. Liz has got in touch to say, makes sense to me, a huge multifaceted portfolio may begin to see results now. GT has messaged us saying that National spent 9 years doing nothing about the growing housing crisis, except counting the votes of the landlord class. Labor are trying to do something. Hasn't gone to plan, but they're going to keep on trying. I know which approach I respect. Short message from Graham. Deck chairs. Titanic. And Mark says the problem is the policy. The minister has an impossible job. Kiwi Build needs desperately to have rent to buy, shared equity and long-term no-buy tenancy options for those unable or not wanting to buy. Until they do that, it remains a land grab and housing for the rich. Keep your feedback coming. Text us on 2101 or you can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. On his last day at work, the outgoing Treasury Secretary, Gabriel McLough, has been slammed as clumsy and unreasonable in his handling of last month's budget breach. The State Services Commissioner delivered the public dressing down this morning, but Mr McLough has escaped any serious sanction as he departs for his new job in Ireland. Here's our Deputy Political Editor, Craig McCulloch.
Last day on the job after 8 years as Treasury Secretary, Gabriel McLough now leaving under a cloud.
Short of putting Mr McLough in the village stocks, I am doing what I can do here. We are where we are, I am doing what I can do.
The head of the public service, Peter Hughes, clearly frustrated with Gabriel McLough. An investigation has found the Treasury boss acted unreasonably in describing last month's budget breach as a deliberate and systematic hack. This is how Mr McLough explained it to Morning Report.
Imagine you've got a room in which you have placed important documents that you feel are secure, they're bolted down in the lock and key. But unknown to you, one of those bolts has a weakness. And someone who attacks that bolt deliberately, persistently, repeatedly finds that it breaks and they can enter and access those papers. And that's what's happened here.
The report says that analogy was unreasonable too. It was later revealed the National Party had uncovered the budget data by using the Treasury website's search bar.
It was a clumsy response to a serious issue and not how I would expect something of this nature to be managed.
Peter Hughes notes the report clears Mr McLough of any political bias and concludes he was acting in good faith. But he says that's not good enough. He says the chief executive should have publicly taken responsibility for the failure rather than deflecting.
When things go wrong, I don't want ducking, diving, running for cover, spinning. I want people to stand up, own it, fix it, learn from it and be accountable.
And that's not what's happened here. Not once has Gabriel McLough expressed regret over his actions. He's never offered his resignation. Indeed, he still maintains he's done nothing wrong. Defiant to the end. Peter Hughes says, even taking that into account, the behaviour does not cross the threshold to become a sackable offence.
We can't run the public service on the basis that you're only as good as your last mistake. We can't do that. That's The Apprentice. It's not Fair Go New Zealand.
In any other scenario, Mr Hughes might issue a written warning, perhaps impose a financial penalty. But Mr McCloof is already halfway out the door. He's soon to begin a new job as the head of Ireland's central bank. And so today's dressing down is the extent of the punishment.
What's most important to him right now is his reputation, and my sitting here saying the things that I am saying to you is not going to do that very much good at all, and is going to be a real burden for him.
The Finance Minister, Grant Robertson, has issued a 5-sentence statement welcoming the report and noting its finding that all involved acted in good faith. A spokesperson declined an interview request, saying he was up north and out of reception. It left the Minister David Parker to answer opposition questions in Parliament this afternoon.
Does he accept that when significant mistakes and failings occur at the Treasury, the buck stops with him? And if so, why did he not offer his resignation to the Prime Minister?
Because that would have been a complete overreaction to
National's not content with that, though. Paula Bennett wants both the Secretary and Finance Minister to front up and say sorry.
From our perspective, the very least we should be expecting is an apology to the New Zealand public for the incompetence that's been shown throughout this whole episode.
She and New Zealanders may be waiting a while. Gabriel McCloof turned down our request for an interview again. Atu iti whare parimata mō te hōtaka o te ahiahi, ko Craig McCulloch.
Well, in the last hour, Gabriel McCloof has issued a brief response to the report, saying he's read it carefully and is pleased his honesty and integrity are not in question. He says the inquiry confirms he acted at all times in good faith and without bias, and acted reasonably other than in his descriptions of the incident. In his first ever public display of regret, he apologises that the budget information was not kept secret, but not for his handling of the breach. The statement ends with a note. Mr McCloof will be making no further comment on the matter. Coming up on Checkpoint on RNZ National, a photograph of a drowned migrant father and his child on the banks of the US-Mexico border sends shockwaves through the world. Olympian Stephen Ferguson, son of Kiwi kayaking legend Ian Ferguson, gets a Team New Zealand call-up, and we're there as a geriatric monkey with stress-related alopecia gets a much-needed checkup. He is so cute. You will not want to miss this. We're getting a lot of feedback from you. Do keep it coming on Kiwi Build. This from Clive, who says, we work in Hawke's Bay and want to be involved in Kiwi Build, but rules are aimed at big cities, 20-unit minimum contracts. We can do 4 to 5, so a reset should include us. No Kiwi Build units are underway in the Bay, where housing market is hot. Thanks for that, Clive. And another one says, let's applaud the Labour government for tackling the housing shortage. Let's not forget, John Key said there was no housing crisis and National did nothing when they had the chance. The Kiwi Build targets were odd, and we all know it takes at least a year to build a house, but let's get them built alongside some much needed social housing. Thanks for that. The text again, 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or you could go with old-fashioned email, checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Time now, though, for the headlines with Susanna.
Phil Twyford has lost the housing portfolio in Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern's first substantive cabinet reshuffle. Megan Woods will take over the role, leading a new team of housing ministers and the Kiwi Build reset. Ms Ardern says the new look housing portfolios are an admission that the job has been too big for one minister and an admission that the government has got things wrong with Kiwi Build. Victims of the Christchurch terror attacks have been told how the remaining financial donations will be allocated. Final payments are going to 296 people in 4 categories, ranging from a $50,000 lump sum for victims' families to $5,000 to people who were in the mosques during the shootings but were uninjured. Victim Support says more than 900 people have sought financial support. But a hero of the Christchurch attacks who chased away the gunman from the Linwood Mosque says he's disappointed with Victim Support's approach of dividing the final sum of money. Abdul Aziz says many are unhappy with the categorising of the funds. He says everybody who asked for financial help should have been paid the same amount. The Department of Conservation has admitted it failed to properly assess the risk of the Cape Kidnappers track before a massive slip came down earlier this year. 2 Korean tourists were injured when the slip swept them out to sea. An internal investigation by the department has found the walk to the Gannet colony should never have been promoted as a Great Day Walk, as it may have led some people to believe there was no risk. DOC says it should have identified all areas at risk of a rock fall. A mud pool which erupted in a residential area of Rotorua has tripled in size since it appeared earlier this week. The pool appeared in the back garden of a whakarewarewa home, and it's now threatening a garden shed. The Rotorua Lakes Council has put up fences around the site, which is still bubbling and sending out steam and boiling mud. Those are the latest news headlines on RNZ National. Our next news and weather update is at 6.
Thanks, Susanna. If you're just joining us, this is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. You've come along at the right time for business with Madison Reedy. Hi, Madison.
Hi, Lisa. I was quite keen to go straight to that sick monkey, though. That sounded cute.
Oh, Laurie. Yes, you've got to tune in for Laurie a bit later. Really gorgeous pictures, and his carer tells an amazing story. So thanks for the promo, Maddie.
Can't wait.
But in business today, I can't keep up with these surveys. So you've got a business confidence survey out today. Any change in the mood?
There was actually this time in the ANZ Business Outlook survey. It actually fell 6 points to a net 38% of firms are being pessimistic. That's businesses expecting the economic conditions to worsen over the next 12 months. It was pretty weak and poor performing across the board as well. More businesses are expecting their profit conditions to worsen. They're also expecting the ability to lend money, to borrow off banks, to get harder, particularly agriculture. In fact, no farmers at the moment are actually expecting it to get any easier to lend money off their banks. So the measure that we've got this time around is actually nearing levels that we saw when this current government was actually first appointed to lead. Now, that's despite, in their term, them ditching the idea of a capital gains tax. This is also despite the Reserve Bank making a cut to the official cash rate in May most recently, and also despite the Prime Minister's own Business Advisory Council, which she set up to help her tackle issues like low business confidence. Now, this means that businesses are worried about things other than that. Most notably, they're worried about the gloomy outlook, the big cloud that's hanging over our economy and, in fact, the world's economy at the moment. Also, they're extremely worried about the increased cost of doing business, and that also comes down to things like the government increasing the minimum wage. Now, the big question is always, why should we care? I mean, Lisa, you've even said to me before that we could line the walls of the studio with the amount of business surveys that we have. But we should certainly care about how businesses are feeling, because not only do they boost the economy, they are the powerhouses that are working behind it, but also if they are not feeling optimistic, then they're unlikely to invest. That means that they're not likely to train their staff and they're not likely to hire any more staff. Now, more economists looking at this survey result, they do reckon this is yet another sign that unemployment is going to tick up, and that won't be good news for the government, because they certainly like talking about historically low unemployment at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so there's chatter about G20, is the G20 summit. Is that what everyone is clustered around the water cooler talking about, Madison?
The water cooler, we actually have one of those upstairs, don't we?
Yeah. So is it going to affect us?
Well, yes, it will. I mean, the idea of this entire trade war between the United States and China is going to basically cloud the whole G20 summit that's happening in Osaka in Japan this weekend. Now, this trade war, trade tension, as people are calling it, it is the biggest weight and one of the biggest downside risks to the world economies. I mean, every single country is flagging this as a risk, including our own. Even the Reserve Bank, as I mentioned before, every time they make a rate decision or a monetary policy statement recently, they have mentioned the US-China trade war in it. So we're even talking about it in this tiny corner of the world. People do like to think that we're safe down here, but we should not be reassured by that. We are a trading nation. We rely on our exports, which means, and in fact, China is our largest trading partner of them all. So if China succeeds, we succeed. If China goes down, we'll go down with it. Our success is very closely tied to theirs. And also when it comes to KiwiSaver as well. In fact, the New Zealand super fund, the state-owned super fund itself, and most of our largest fund managers, which likely are in charge of most people's KiwiSavers, they do have their fingers in pies all around the world, particularly in big technology companies, your Google, your Apple, and your microchip companies, things like that, which will be the most impacted by these tit-for-tat tariffs that we're seeing around the world.
Yeah. Hey, let's take a quick canter around the markets. What have you got for us?
The NZX Top 50 index closed up tonight. Not a record high for you tonight, though, I'm sorry. It rose 0.2%. That's 23 points to close at 10,431. The New Zealand dollar, that's buying at 66.8 US cents, 95.5 to the Australian and 52.7 British pence. That's pretty high for the Kiwi that we've seen today, and that's probably because the Reserve Bank did not cut interest rates yesterday.
Thanks, Madison. Madison Reedy will probably pop back just to hear that story about the monkey. So should you. Don't go away. A New Zealand First MP says deliberate delays to the end-of-life choice bill mean the public might not get its say on euthanasia at the 2020 election. The Coalition Party's support for the bill is conditional on the issue being put to a referendum, but there's a lot of debate and possible amendments before that happens, if at all. The bill passed its second reading last night, though by a smaller margin than the first reading vote, with a number of MPs changing their minds. Alex Perrottet reports.
The bill passed its second reading late last night by 70 votes to 50 and will now be debated in detail in Parliament. And if the bill is finally passed, it could be very different after a whole host of attempts by MPs to change it. New Zealand First's Tracy Martin says she'll introduce her party's proviso that the bill be put to the public.
But if that supplementary order paper doesn't go through, then it's back to a conscience vote and every member of the caucus will vote on their conscience.
She says in that scenario she would withdraw support for the bill, but her 8 colleagues won't reveal their cards on that just yet. She says the Electoral Commission would need months to prepare for a referendum at the 2020 election, and if the bill can't be finalised in the House by February or March, it may well be too late. And Tracy Martin says there's enough opposition to cause those delays.
I think they're trying to push the process of this bill so far out that there won't be enough time for it to get to a referendum, even if our supplementary order paper is supported. Now people are using the political tools they have to try and get the outcome that they want, I suppose.
So how could the bill change? Some say the bill is too restrictive and discriminates against age, as 16-year-olds can't access it. Others warn that once a regime is in place, it could be broadened out to children, as happened in Belgium. Lawyer Catherine Marks is a friend of euthanasia campaigner Lucretia Seals, who died in 2015. And Catherine Marks was part of her legal team. She's also worked on David Seymour's bill and defended the claim by some lawyers that it doesn't contain enough safeguards and, in the future, could be opened up to children.
But that's never going to be in law, and it's not in the bill. So to say that it's going to be available to people under 18 is just not true. I just can't see where the evidence is that supports a lot of these concerns that are being raised.
Catherine Marks also says claims the bill leaves vulnerable people open to abuse are ill-founded. But criminal law expert Judith Ablett-Kerr QC has joined a chorus of concerned lawyers who say it's inevitable that the elderly, the disabled and terminally ill will feel themselves to be a burden.
How are you going to assess whether there has been coercion or whether there hasn't? Coercion can be covert, it can be overt. It's very hard to find. We see it in criminal cases. It's a real issue when you've got vulnerable people, because even the non-vulnerable are subject to coercion.
The Green Party is also voting as a bloc and have heard concerns raised by the disability sector, including the Disability Rights Commissioner Paula Tesoriero, that those living with a disability are at risk. And they say they want to see the bill restricted to those with a terminal illness. Retired palliative care Dr Libby Smales is in favour of the bill and says that would amount to discrimination.
I think it's really disappointing because I think that is quite discriminatory. And if I had Huntington's or motor neuron disease, I would be appalled at that. And disability is an interesting one. My stepson spent his life in an electric wheelchair, and he said, I don't want to be excluded from this legislation. I want the same chance as anybody else. If I get something else on top of my quadriplegia, I would like to have choice.
Claire Freeman broke her neck and lost movement in her arms and legs in a car accident and was then further paralysed in a botched operation. She attempted suicide 6 times and had booked a flight to Switzerland to end her life with Dignitas, but says, ironically, it was only after that operation and with more rest and support that she found a purpose and a will to live. She says on 2 occasions beforehand she saw medical professionals who had no other option or encouragement for her than to agree that suicide was the best way for her. She says introducing euthanasia now, with that lack of support, is dangerous.
It terrifies me and it makes me very angry. And it's the biggest reason why I'm very opposed to the end-of-life choice bill, because I think before we look into assisted suicide, and we just do not have a good handle on, even health professionals' attitudes towards people like myself.
Claire Freeman says there needs to be far more engagement with the public before any bill becomes law.
And we just wanted to say, hey, look, we're scared. We're not opposed to the idea, but we really feel like before this comes into place, we need to look at what supports are available, because what supports are out there are not good. They're not good.
The CEO of the Maxim Institute, Alex Penk, who is against the bill, says he too is concerned that the process from now on will not include voices from outside the Parliament. Still, he says it will be a drawn-out and complicated process.
For many MPs, it seems like there's a hope for them that Parliament's going to somehow be able to number 8 wire this bill into a fit state to pass. But there seems to be a lot of uncertainty about that. And the process from here, I have to say, looks pretty messy.
After this stage, the bill must pass its 3rd reading before receiving royal assent and becoming law. For Checkpoint, Alex Perrottet.
Let's get to a bit more of your feedback now. This is on Kiwi Build, basically, and the cabinet reshuffle, which the Prime Minister announced today. Phil Twyford's moving sideways away from the Kiwi Build programme. Megan Woods will take over as Housing Minister in charge of all housing, with oversight over that. This one from Peter. The message that National did nothing is so wrong. 100,000 houses in Christchurch needed fixing or rebuilding at a total cost of $40 billion, and this diverted resources away from building new houses in the rest of the country. That is not doing nothing, says Peter. Robin's got in touch to say, when will the 9-year false fact stop? And we talk about the reality of a world economic meltdown and the Christchurch and Kaikoura earthquakes. The 9-year story is fake. After 18 months of the new government doing nothing, it is time for them to stop the storytelling and start doing what they promised. And this one from Mark from Kaikoi. Gotta love the Nats. Spend 9 years denying there was a housing crisis, now slag government off for not doing enough to solve the crisis they made. You should remind them of that rather than just let them spout their revisionist drivel, says Mark. To the US now, the Republican-controlled US Senate has approved a bill to send aid to the border with Mexico as the image of a drowned migrant family shocks the US. The Senate earlier rejected a rival aid bill from the Democratic-led House of Representatives, which imposed restrictions on US immigration agencies and prevented them using the money for the border wall. Lawmakers in both chambers now face pressure to reconcile the two bills. Reports of migrant deaths, poor detention conditions and neglected child detainees have all shaped the debate in Washington. But more than anything, it is the photograph of a dead migrant father and a child in the Rio Grande River that has struck the loudest note across the US today. The BBC's Ola Guerin reports, and just a warning, if you are watching, some of the images are disturbing.
Searching the muddy waters of the Rio Grande, where hidden currents can so quickly claim lives. Many migrant deaths pass unnoticed or ignored. Not this time, because of a single stark image with the power to shock the world. A father and baby daughter from El Salvador, Oscar and Valeria Ramirez, her tiny arm around his neck. We met Oscar's grieving mother, Rosa, at the family home in San Salvador. She said they were poor in material things, but rich in love. Oscar sent her a photo when they reached Mexico. Father and daughter together in life as in death. Valeria's first word was Papa. She would have been 2 next month. When they left, Rosa was filled with dread.
Como le digo, uno de madre presiente y sí, yo lloré bastante.
As a mother, you get a feeling. I cried a lot when we said goodbye, because in my heart I felt it was going to be the last time I would hug him.
Y
I told him I loved him very much and to take care of himself. He told me the same. He said he wanted to help the whole family and that, God willing, he would make it. And the last text he sent me was on Saturday morning. He said he loved me very much. And that was the last message before he passed away.
A day later, he perished with his daughter. His wife, Tanya, saw it all. Rosa is begging others not to go, as she begged her son.
My message is, don't follow the dream that ends in death. I know everything is hard here, but life is valuable. Stay in your country and fight.
But many are desperate to get away from no-go neighbourhoods like Oscar's, where gangs are in control. The community here has been deeply affected by this tragedy. Will it stop others trying to make the same risky journey? Probably not. Many young Salvadorans feel that reaching the United States is their only hope of finding a decent job and a better life. Countless numbers from across Central America are willing to risk death for that new life. President Trump has tried hard to stem the flow, backed by plenty of his countrymen. The president says open borders mean drownings. He's blaming the Democrats and gave this reaction to the photo of Oscar and his daughter.
I hate it, and I know it could stop immediately if the Democrats change the law. They have to change the laws. And then that father, who probably was this wonderful guy with his daughter, things like that wouldn't happen, because that journey across that river is a very dangerous journey.
It was a journey Oscar Ramirez could not complete. He was just 25, but a dedicated family man who doted on his daughter.
And that's Orla Guerin in El Salvador. It is about 12 minutes away from 6. I'm Lisa Owen and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Do let us know your thoughts on anything you've heard on the program this evening. You can text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Let's go back to our top story today, which is obviously the Prime Minister has announced the reshuffle to her cabinet and, a spruce up to the Kiwi Build policy. Phil Twyford is out. He's losing that housing portfolio. Megan Woods is taking over from him. She will lead a new team and take charge of Kiwi Build. And other responsibilities in that housing portfolio have basically been carved up. Now, someone to benefit from that carve up is Mana MP Chris Faafoi. He has previously been outside Cabinet, a minister outside Cabinet. He's been promoted into Cabinet now and is going to take responsibility for state housing and homelessness. And I believe he's on the line now. Kia ora, Chris.
Hi, Lisa. How are you?
Very well, thank you. Congratulations.
Thank you.
What are your top priorities?
Oh, look, continuing the good work in public housing that Phil has begun and trying to make sure we can accelerate the opportunities for people to get into public housing. The housing problem isn't going away. So someone whose own family was given an opportunity via a state house. I kind of see it as one of the basic responsibilities or the privilege of this role to make sure we can supply them for others. So
how are you going to do that? How are you going to do that? There's more than 11,000 people on the waiting list. You're talking about escalating things here. How are you going to do that? Because obviously you're competing with labourers and builders who are wanting to build Kiwi Build houses as well.
Yeah, that's why working alongside the Minister of Housing, who has responsibility for Kiwi Build, is extremely important, because we're going to have to coordinate those efforts, as has been the case to date as well. But making sure we get the right mix of both the increase that we need for both Kiwi Build and for public housing is important, and also working alongside the likes of community housing providers to ensure that we can put people who need public housing in those spaces. It's going to be a mission and one that, I hope to use the experience of the last 18 months of just knuckling down and getting onto some of this hard work and finding out where some of the hold-ups or the blockages might be to increase the supply of public housing available.
How many houses how many social houses will this government have built in its first year?
So, Lisa, two things. So we've built, I think it's 1,400 to date. I am now 2 hours into this responsibility and haven't even had a chance to meet with my officials, so I think it would be rather naive of me to give an answer to that now. But what I do commit to is making sure that I can do my best as the new Associate Housing Minister to make sure that those opportunities are there for those people who need that housing.
Prior to the election, Phil Twyford said that he thought you could eradicate homelessness, within 2 terms. Eradicating homelessness within 2 terms. Do you stand by that? Is that a goal you will work to, and can you achieve it?
Well, I'm in a time that I'm going to have the portfolio, Lisa. I'm going to try my best to chip away as much as I can to the homelessness problem. I don't want to see anyone who's in those positions either sleeping in cars. That's not what most New Zealanders would want. As I say, I'm just 2 hours into this job, and I want to make sure that I get a good idea of where things are at. But as someone, again, who had the opportunity of a state home and the privilege of that, it's going to be absolutely fundamental to me that we tackle the problem of making sure there are enough public houses and we can have a decent crack at reducing homelessness as much as we can.
Thanks for joining us, the newly minted Minister inside Cabinet, Chris Faafoi, who, as you heard there, is taking responsibility for state housing and homelessness. And as he said, only a couple of hours with his feet under the desk in that role. Now to a story of a senior citizen who's doing it a little hard this winter with a bout of alopecia, leaving him exposed to the cooler temperatures. 28-year-old Laurie is a capuchin monkey who escaped a life in the circus to spend his twilight years with his foster family and 5 other monkeys in Kaitoki near Wellington. His hair and recent rapid weight loss is a bit of a worry, so today his carer, Carolyn Press-McKenzie, headed off to Wild Base Hospital at Massey University so Laurie could get the once-over from their specialist vets.
He's been losing a bit of weight. It was something we noticed, but it wasn't alarming. And then in the last few days, he's just really dropped. And so when you're dealing with a wild animal, you don't really want to have to take them to the doctors. It can stress them quite a lot. So it was picking that right time, and last night we looked at him and thought, no, we've got to go and get some bloods and run some. He's kind of a senior citizen, so run a senior citizen panel on him, really.
How old is he then?
He's about 28. He's not our oldest monkey. We have a 33-year-old and a 36-year-old and a 38-year-old as well, but he's always been a little bit puny. He's come from quite a rough beginning, as it were, so he's never been a flourishing monkey, but he's had a lot of love in the last few years, which have really supported him through it.
So what is Laurie's background? What was the rough beginning?
So he came from the circus, so he was captive born, and then they get taken from their mum and get set to work training to be circus performers. And he's quite an emotionally a sensitive chap. So for him, I think there was an awful lot of emotional pressure through his life. We just did x-rays at the vets just now, and they've found he's had broken ribs in the past. He's had a few battles along the way, I think, just to be a happy chap, and I don't think for many years he pulled it off. Apparently he was trained to ride ponies, and after a while he started acting out and throwing tantrums and biting people, so he was set aside, and at the circus he travelled with the circus, but for a few years there he didn't perform because he wasn't behaving well enough. So when we got him, he was quite a broken little chap. He had a chain around his neck, and he was very shut down, would rock a lot and scream a lot. But he's full of love and life now, but his little body is still, I think, not as robust as it should be.
I understand he's got a touch of alopecia, is that right?
Yeah, so initially when he came to us, he was sort of self-inflicted alopecia. So he was pulling out his hair a little bit just around his flank, and has always had that, and we've always sort of accepted it as just being part of his journey. But what's happened in the last sort of month or so is it started tracking right up the side of his body. So he's sort of almost bald down one side, which is obviously not okay. And it's winter, so it's especially not okay. It's cold out there. So he's gone off to the wonderful wild-based team at Massey. They're amazing. And how often do you have a monkey vet just up the road? So we're pretty lucky, really. So we've had to package him up and drive him to Massey, and they've done basically they knocked him down, so he had an anaesthetic.
So he had the little gas mask on. I saw him, he had the little gas mask on. And I'm wondering, was he a little nervy? Because I saw his little tiny paw gripping onto your finger in one of the photos.
Yeah, we're always holding hands. We've got a bit of a special relationship now. So he likes to seek comfort. So he was actually asleep, so maybe him holding my paw at that point, my hand at that point was actually for me more than for him. But when he is awake, we do hold hands a lot. And he actually, his best friend in the whole world is a cat. Because he's come from such a dysfunctional past, he doesn't get on particularly well with other primates. So he actually raised a kitten. He raised her about 8 years ago, and he lives with her and loves her and cuddles her, and they're best friends. And Daisy, here we go. It's giving him a grape. He's waking up, so he's hungry. He's there, and he's been with us, I'd say, about 12 or 13 years now. He's really settled into a wee routine, and he likes to dig for worms and sit up in trees, and, he's having a good time, I think, except for something going majorly wrong with his body right now, so we need to get to the bottom of it.
Have the vets been able to tell you anything after the tests, or is there a bit of a waiting time for that?
Well, the good news is they were with the rapid weight loss, we were worried about a tumour perhaps, so he's had full body x-rays, and there was nothing alarming, which was good. So that's really good. We're ruling out the really big, scary ones straight away. But the blood results we won't get till tomorrow, and the skin sort of scrapes and fecal counts and everything else like that we won't have probably for another week or so. So we're a wee way away from knowing completely. But we're just going to sort of set him up with an extra special heat lamp and just nurse him along a little bit and see if we can just sort of ride it out while we wait for some results to give us more conclusive idea of what we're dealing with.
So Laurie's having a bit of a yawn and a wake up there, is he? How's he looking?
He's sitting up now, and he's just sucking on a grape. He likes juicy fruit, and he's got a bit of avocado in his other hand. So, he's kind of wobbling a bit. He has to hold himself up, but he's doing really well.
Oh, well, if he's looking for food, he's obviously perked up.
Exactly. So, no, it's only good news. That's really good. But we just want to get to the bottom of what's causing this weight loss. It's always a concern, isn't it? But he looks like a little old man now. He's gone from, being a handsome young chap to sort of looking a little bit of a withered old man. So we'll just make sure whatever we can do for him to give him the best quality of life that's what we're aiming for anyway.
It's Carolyn Press-McKenzie, who's Laurie's caregiver. And if you are not watching, you do need to go online to see those pictures of Laurie. He is so cute, even with his slightly mottled alopecia coat. And his best buddy, the cat, which he raised from a kitten, is called Jungle. So we will have pictures of Jungle and Laurie on our Facebook page and our webpage. Do go and check it out. We have a statement here from Megan Woods, who is the new Minister of Housing, who's taking over the Kiwi Build portfolio. She says she's received the portfolio less than 24 hours ago. She'll be taking the recess to decide to bring together a work program and to take over the Kiwi Build reset. She said, in part, Kiwi Build isn't working like we had wanted, so we will be changing it. People want their government to be honest when things aren't working and try something new instead.
RNZ News at 6. Ngā mihi nui ko Susana Lei Atawa tēnei. The new Associate Housing Minister, Chris Faafoi, is the big winner from the Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern's first substantial reshuffle and says it's a privilege to be helping the government improve public housing. Mr Faafoi has been promoted to a minister inside of Cabinet. He's joining a team of ministers led by Megan Woods, who's taken over the housing portfolio from Phil Twyford. Mr Faafoi says he knows from personal experience how important access to public housing can be.
I grew up in a state house, so having that privilege of a state house has meant a lot for me and my family, so taking over that challenge is something that I'm looking forward to.
Chris Faafoi says he's waiting until he has his feet under the table to outline how he plans to go about building more public houses. A man is dead after jumping in a river as he fled the police in Bay of Plenty this afternoon. The police say there was a warrant out for his arrest. The 24-year-old was spotted in Kawerau about 1:30 today, and when officers approached, he ran towards the Tarawera River. He jumped into the water and quickly got into difficulty. Police officers pulled him out and tried to resuscitate him, but he died at the scene. An investigation is now underway, and the Independent Police Conduct Authority has been notified. Victim Support is handing out the last $2.5 million to the victims of the Christchurch mosque shootings and the families of those who lost their lives. It comes on top of the $7 million it's already distributed in 2 previous payments. It's taken a more graduated approach this time, paying slightly more to the injured depending on whether they were shot or had minor injuries. Victim Support CEO Kevin So says he took advice from medical, ethical and legal experts and listened to the community.
It was clear that as a community they expected Victim Support to recognise that there should be different levels of payment for the bereaved, those shot, the injured and those present at the time of the attacks. With the support of the police list, we are confident that 100% of the donated funds has gone to the victims.
Kevin So says the families of those who died, including widows with small children, will receive the most. The outgoing Treasury Secretary, Gabriel McCloof, has issued a statement saying he's sorry for not keeping budget information secure. The State Services Commission released a report today into his handling of the breach of budget information from Treasury's website, describing it as clumsy and unreasonable. It also criticised him for not taking responsibility for the incident. Mr McCloof has apologised for not keeping the information secure, but he says the report confirms he acted in good faith and with political neutrality, and he's pleased his honesty and integrity are not in question. A separate inquiry will look at exactly how the budget information was accessed and how to stop it happening again. The first televised debate of the 2020 US presidential election has seen sharp exchanges between 10 of the 20 politicians vying for the job of being the Democratic Party's nomination. Progressives and moderates discussed healthcare funding, climate change and immigration. The BBC's John Sopel reports.
Democratic Party hopefuls rounded on Donald Trump over his zero-tolerance immigration policies with venom. Attacks sharpened by that disturbing photo of a father, Oscar Ramirez, and his 2-year-old daughter, Valeria, drowned in the Rio Grande trying to get into the US. There were calls for a renewal of the process by which those who are in America can be put onto a path for citizenship. And there was a demand that more be done to offer assistance to the Central American countries so there's not the same drive for families to head north. This will be a central issue in next year's election, but it's an urgent issue right now.
John Sopel reporting. Meanwhile, the President, Donald Trump, who was watching the debate, tweeted the word boring. The jury in the trial of 2 cousins accused of murdering a man in the Auckland suburb of Mangere will resume its deliberations tomorrow after 11.5 hours without a verdict. Abraham Tuuheava was shot dead and his wife severely injured on Greenwood Road last May. Fisilau Tapaivalu and Mesui Tufui both deny charges of murder and attempted murder, while a third man has admitted them. The Crown's case is that all 3 men worked together to carry out the killing. It's 6:04. The Chiefs coach, Colin Cooper, has suddenly quit with a year still to run on his Super Rugby contract. Cooper has been in charge of the Hamilton-based side for the past 2 seasons and has guided them to the quarterfinals each time. He sought an early release from his job, saying the role of head coach took him away from his passion of hands-on coaching, and he will take time out to consider his future. A possible replacement for Cooper could be former Waikato coach Warren Gatland, who's leaving the Wales job after this year's World Cup. Gatland has previously said he's interested in returning to a Super Rugby role in New Zealand, but was reappointed earlier this month as British and Irish Lions coach for their 2021 tour of South Africa. There are 4 newcomers, 4-time Olympian Stephen Ferguson among them in the Team New Zealand squad to defend the America's Cup in Auckland in 2021. Ferguson, the son of 4-time Olympics kayak gold medalist Ian Ferguson, has represented New Zealand at 4 Olympic Games as both a swimmer and canoeist. Sports editor Stephen Hewson reports.
Team New Zealand have named their 14-strong squad to defend the Old Mug 2 years to the day after they reclaimed it in Bermuda. Stephen Ferguson will be a grinder on the new 75-foot foiling monohulls that will be used in Auckland. The other newcomers are Wairoa's Louis Sinclair, Whangarei's Marcus Hansen and Russell's Marius van der Poel. They'll line up in the engine room with Andy Maloney, Josh Jr., Joseph Sullivan, Carlo Hoosman, Guy Indian and Simon van Veldhoven, who are all part of the Bermuda crew. The other remaining positions on board will be covered by existing Team New Zealand sailors Glenn Ashby, Peter Burling, Blair Tuke and Ray Davies. This is Stephen Hewson.
Tonight on Nights, Alison Balance is down at the lab observing experiments to assess how well fish navigate underground urban streams. The artist Rachel Rakena talks about a multimedia project that's turning Wellington's inner harbour into a giant canvas, and this week's overseas correspondent Elizabeth Mahase updates us on Syria, where hospitals are often the primary target in that country's 8-year-long civil war. On Nights after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. Northland, Coromandel Peninsula and Great Barrier Island. Generally fine weather, however a few showers in the east. For the remainder of the North Island, fine weather, apart from areas of morning and evening low cloud or fog. Isolated showers in Auckland tonight. Southland and Fiordland, cloudy periods, a few showers about the coast and fields, clearing Southland this evening. For the remainder of the South Island, mostly fine weather, frosts morning and night, however a few areas of morning and evening low cloud or fog about some sheltered valleys and basins. For the Chatham Islands, mostly cloudy, a chance of a light shower. You're with RNZ National, it's 7.5 minutes past 6.
Thank you, Susanna. This is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. It was too big for one person and we've got things wrong. That admission from the Prime Minister today as she reshuffled her cabinet in a bid to address problems with the housing portfolio and what was once a flagship program for Labour, KiwiBuild. Now housing is getting a makeover. Phil Twyford has been moved aside to become Minister of Urban Development. Megan Woods will be the new Housing Minister, working with a new entrant to Cabinet, Mana MP Chris Faafoi, who has been given responsibility for social housing and homelessness. So is the reshuffle an admission that Phil Twyford has failed in the job?
No, it's an admission though that it was a huge job. It was a job too big for one minister, and it's an admission that we know we have got things wrong with KiwiBuild. We do want to bring in a fresh pair of eyes because we aren't giving up on the housing crisis. We know there's more work to do. We know that whilst there's a lot that's gone right in housing, the amount of, for instance, state housing that we're now building, there are elements where we haven't got things right. We know they need to be fixed. Bringing in additional team members is part of fixing that issue, but we know equally that there is still more work to be done.
Jacinda Ardern was asked whether the task of implementing the KiwiBuild program was always too big for one person.
Yeah, I actually remember having a conversation with Phil Twyford right at the beginning where we talked about how significant the challenge was, and even the fact that that's sitting alongside transport, whilst they work together really well, it was a big agenda. So we did talk about that, but that was something that we were still committed to trying to pursue. We're acknowledging here that actually it is too big a job for one person. We have made mistakes, and we do want to bring in extra ministers and actually an extra set of eyes on the challenges that we have with the KiwiBuild program. But at the same time, I am still very proud of the progress we've made. We are building more houses than any other government since the 1970s.
Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern. Former Labour leader David Cunliffe spent nearly 20 years in Parliament, but he left politics altogether in 2017. Nowadays, he's immersed in the corporate world, a partner at Stakeholders Strategies in Auckland, but he knows these politicians well. He worked with them for years. So what does he think of Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern's reshuffle? He joins me now from our Wellington studio. Good evening, David.
Good evening, Lisa.
Let's start with housing, because that's the big ticket item. So what do you think? Well, does Megan Woods have something that means she's more likely to succeed where Phil Twyford has failed?
I think you've just run a clip where the Prime Minister's told it pretty much like it is. This is not about an individual failing, it's about a job being too big for any one person. I think it's fair to say that Megan Woods has learned some particular skills from her experience in the Christchurch build from the rubble up. She's brought people together across the private sector, the construction sector, the public sector, local government, central government, and she'll bring that experience to the housing portfolio. But I think this is a transition from policy design you do in opposition and sell in your early days in government to the hard yards of delivery, and Megan Woods is very good at that. She will, I think, be a very effective team leader for that expanded team.
Is it the Prime Minister's mistake not realising that housing was too big a portfolio for just one minister?
Well, of course, he had transport as well and retains transport, and just in passing to note that he's picked up another very senior portfolio in economic development. But back to your question, look, it's easy before you confront the hard realities of a complex problem to underestimate just how difficult it is. And let's also remember this is not a new issue. The previous government, I think it's fair to say, knew from at least the middle of their term that the housing crisis was getting worse. They didn't do anything about it. They didn't campaign on it. They didn't act on it. And it is now a real world-scale crisis, and it's a crisis because the market is not functioning well, the contracting system's not working too well in the private sector. Risk gets passed to the subbies. There's been some screws tightened on that, which has meant that large companies like Fletcher Buildings have had issues in the marketplace. There's a skills shortage in the construction sector that's holding the sector back, and I don't think the depth of all of that was foreseeable for a government before it took office. Now they're confronted with just how hard it is, and they're throwing more resource at it on a meritocratic basis. I don't think they can be criticised for that.
Hey, you would have been there when all of these conversations were happening around KiwiBuild, and word was that KiwiBuild started out with thinking, well, 50,000 houses would be enough, but it ended up at 100,000. So do you think being over-ambitious has kind of kneecapped this government, and that perhaps they should have been a bit more realistic with their targets?
Well, it is about delivery, I agree with you, and the Prime Minister said that herself. This is the year of delivery. She's rejigging her team to put the people who've proven that they can deliver out there in the real world up the ladder, because they will need to drive change. And Megan Woods, in the clip you just played, said, look, it didn't work. We're going to change it. She's going to take a couple of weeks to get her bearings in the new portfolio. That was indicative of her style. She is very clear, very direct. She will lead that team in a very no-nonsense and I think very business-like way, while being able to talk across the divide of public-private sector, just as Chris Faafoi has proved that he is able to do.
If she is unable, Megan Woods, if she's unable to meet the targets, does that mean that the policy is flawed in some way then? If you give it to a second minister and they can't do it either, is it then the policy is just not achievable?
I think it's too early to put a label on it. Clearly the government has found headwinds in implementation. This is a really tough job to do, but it's a little too early for the jury to come back and say it's a failure or a success.
So how long do you reckon you have to give it? How long do you reckon you have to give it?
Well, I think it subtly put in the language of the Prime Minister's statement was a shift of language away from the focus on KiwiBuild as the first layer word to housing as the first layer word, of which Kiwi Build is now one of 3 key parts.
But do
Kiwi
you do
Build,
that though? Don't you shift your language like that because you're trying to minimise what you haven't managed to do? You're trying to spread the load and offer a distraction, some would argue.
Lisa, that's a political lens. I'm trying to put a practical lens on this, not for political reasons. I'm not here to apologise for a government or otherwise. What I'm saying is the government or New Zealanders don't have enough good houses. They don't have enough warm, dry houses. Homelessness is in shocking proportions in our cities. And I was spent yesterday up in Kaikoui. I can tell you the housing's not flash up in the far north either. We have to get moving on this. Now, Kiwi Build itself is basically a scheme to make it easier for first home buyers to get into the market. Many of our poorest New Zealanders, the people who are most vulnerable, aren't in the position to be first home buyers, so Kiwi Build isn't going to solve their problem. That's why the government is re-gearing to put more emphasis on social housing. That's why it's brought Chris Faafoi into that role. That's why Megan Woods is not the Minister of Kiwi Build, she's the Minister of Housing, and she will drive that team hard to deliver more appropriate houses for people who need it most. Kiwi Build will be a part of it, and they haven't announced any of this yet, but if I'm a betting man, what I suspect is there'll be less emphasis on the total Kiwi Build target and more emphasis on the total housing target. And that will be a mix of Kiwi Build, community housing, state housing, and possibly leveraging up the local government sector just like we used to.
Hey, just a couple of quick things that we can rip through. Anyone in there that you think should have got a boost today and didn't get it?
Look, honestly, I thought the lineup was a pretty far-reaching and pretty meritocratic lineup. I'm not going to play sideline quarterback and say move this person or not, but let's just say it went right down the chain. It was good to see some of the backbench coming forward. My successor in New Lynn, Deborah Russell, goes to Chair of the Finance and Expenditure Committee. Michael Woods is coming up as Chief Whip. Priyanka Radhakrishnan as Ethnic Affairs Parliamentary Under-Secretary, I believe. Potter Williams as a Minister outside Cabinet. She's got a proven record with the community and voluntary sector. So again, based on performance, people are allowed to go forward, and I think that's a pretty good signal to send to everybody else in the caucus. If you do the yards, if you get the practical results on the ground, the system will recognise that and reward it. And I think that's the incentive that every Prime Minister needs to send.
So, what about Meka Whaitiri then? Too early to bring her back?
Look, as I say, I don't want to play quarterback on individuals. The circumstances around Meka, there are a range of views on that. I know
okay, what about Claire Curran, just quickly? You want to sit on the fence with Meka Whaitiri. What about Claire Curran? Do you think she'll ever come back?
I'm not going to play quarterback on individuals. I think Meka may have Meka may be back in before Claire is. That's all I'll say.
All right, thanks for joining us. That is David Cunliffe giving us his thoughts on the Prime Minister's reshuffle. Formerly in Parliament, former leader of Labour himself, now a partner at Stakeholder Strategies in Auckland. Let us know your thoughts. Do you agree with his take on things? You can text us on 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. It's almost 18 minutes past 6. And of course, you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. The earth has continued to move in a small corner of Rotorua today as a mud pool, which erupted overnight on Monday, has got even bigger. Yesterday, I spoke to Susan Gedger, whose home was the Mead Street property in Whakarewarewa, where hot mud and steam started flying out of her backyard at about 2 a.m. it was. This morning, the pool has grown again, and now the double garage is in very real danger of slipping into the mud. Joanna McKenzie has more.
Susan Gedger is philosophical about the new mud pool in her back garden, taking it all in her stride. But even she was startled this morning when she returned home to finish packing and find the cat.
It was a bit of a reality this morning when we realised how much the shed had moved, and it was probably only, like half a metre away from leaning on a huge big power pole that had electricity and phone lines on it. And if the shed leaned on it any more, because it's right on the bank where the mud's giving way, it would have come down and probably fallen on the house.
The power has been cut to the property and gas bottles have been removed. She says it was frightening to see how much had changed overnight.
There had been quite a bit more come away, like the whole corner of the big double garage that's on the bank. It's like there's a big hole underneath that, so it's kind of a matter of time before that just will probably end up down the bank.
Along with packing the house up in record-breaking speed, Susan also needed to find Kitty Kitty the cat.
I had to go back this morning and get my cat as well because she'd gone missing. I think she was a bit stressed. So, we went back to get her out of there.
The fire service has been at the property, flying a drone overhead, trying to get a glimpse of what's inside the pool. GNS volcanologist Brad Scott says it's probably tripled in size since it first formed.
The feature's probably something in the order of 8 to 10 metres long and somewhere around 1.5 metres wide. Don't really have a feel for the depth. It's probably in the order of a couple of metres, but there's so much steam and it's not safe to get close to it.
Brad Scott says it's very difficult to predict how this geothermal activity is going to play out. He says there are 3 possible scenarios. It'll disappear, stay the same size, or grow bigger.
Up until now, I would have said it will probably just hang around for a day or two and go away, but this is looking more like scenario 2, becoming established as a permanent feature.
Safety barriers remain in place, and Rotorua Lakes Council is asking people not to go beyond the fences. Its geothermal inspector, Peter Brownbridge, says the main focus is on safety.
Tenants have moved out. There is a power pole on the property. We've had the power disconnected and the line actually cut, so if the power pole falls down, it's not going to drag the neighbourhood into darkness. So really now it is just a matter of sitting back, watching it and see where it goes.
Photos and measurements have been taken of the mud pool tonight, and those will be checked in the morning to see if it's grown any bigger. Mō te hōtaka o te ahi pōnei, ko Joanna Mackenzie tēnei.
After 1 Olympics as a swimmer and 3 as a kayaker, Stephen Ferguson will now compete at the elite level as a sailor. The son of Kiwi kayaking legend Ian Ferguson has been selected as a grinder for Team New Zealand for the next America's Cup. The 39-year-old is one of 4 new additions to the Team New Zealand roster for their defence of the Old Mug, joining 10 returnees from the successful Bermuda campaign in 2017. Clay Wilson caught up with Stephen Ferguson and started by asking just how his journey to become part of Team New Zealand began.
I retired for 7 years and got 2 boys and a wife, and my wife decided to do a bit of an outdoor reno so the kids had some more space to run around. So I jumped outside and started digging some holes and sorting out some fences and stuff. And my neighbour, Peter Thomas, he just started with Team NZ, and he was wearing a shirt, and I was chatting to him and told him about my dream of being part of the team when I was a kid, and next minute I'd turn there to meetings and the opportunity to start trainings.
What's the whole process been like? Because I imagine, and from what I've seen, it looks pretty gruelling. So can you just describe what the process of the whole trial system's been like until the team was selected?
Grinding's a whole other sport. There's a lot of technique, but it's really how big your engine is, how much you can handle, how much pain you can put yourself in, knowing how hard and how far you can push yourself. Definitely, I've found some new dark places that I've never been before over the last few months in training, and really enjoying, how far I can push myself.
What are your memories of the America's Cup? You mentioned there that was something that you loved as a kid. And I guess the Bermuda campaign, it captured the nation. I'm sure it was something that you were captivated by as well.
That was something that I'll never forget, and that's very much so, and that's excited me for this even more. But growing up watching Peter Blake, going down to Devonport in my Red Sox and cheering on, and the whole environment of what America's Cup was when I was a kid. I remember when they were all sailing through the harbour, I went out with my dad and my brother kayaking and paddled right into the middle of them and thought we were all going to drown at that point in my life. But I think I've always just thought that my abilities, swimming, kayaking, that movement is so similar to what the grinders do. And, watching people like Rob Waddell, Joe Sullivan, Solomon Van Velhoven do what they've done over the campaigns previous really inspired me to try and be a part of this team, and to be able to get the opportunity is super exciting.
Yeah, I wanted to touch on, you mentioned Rob and Joe and Simon. I guess, how did that inspire you? And do you think it would have been something that you would have wanted to do otherwise, like seeing what Rob did and then obviously latterly Joe and Simon? Was that a big part of your inspiration to have a crack at this?
Yeah, 100%. Like in Sydney Olympics, I was there when Rob Waddell was rowing, as a swimmer I was, and he tried to convince me to jump in a rowing boat, but fortunately I jumped into a kayak. My dad would have killed me. But watching his career and to see what he did in San Fran and be part of that, and then also Joe and Simon last campaign. To be honest, I tried to put my hand up for the last one, but once I realised that they were using the cyclaws, my old toothpicks and orange for legs, they probably weren't really what they were looking for. And I want to do this for my family. My kids get to see me race for New Zealand. And when I grew up, my dad was a legend, and to watch him do what he did inspired me to do great things, and I just want to inspire my kids, inspire other people.
Team New Zealand grinder Stephen Ferguson speaking with Clay Wilson. A first-of-its-kind study of little blue penguin in North Taranaki is being credited with giving the at-risk bird a better chance of survival in the region. Finding Little Blue is the brainchild of the Ngā Motu Marine Society, which teamed up with local school children to make it a reality. Our Taranaki Whanganui reporter Robin Martin joined them at Uranui Beach.
Korora are the world's smallest penguin at just over 25 centimetres tall. They weigh about 1 kilo and their numbers are declining. Dogs are the biggest threat to the tiny birds, but cats, stoats and ferrets will also kill them. Finding Little Blue's lead marine scientist, Elvisa van Leyden, says with no previously existing data, the aim was to collect information on the bird's distribution and nesting behaviour.
And we've been working with young citizen scientists from Puketapu School and Devon Intermediate who have been helping us develop the monitoring technology and putting those units in the burrows, the man-made burrows that we've got set up so that we can watch temperature rises and falls in their burrows over time online.
Ms van Leyden says the students came up with the idea of using temperature to monitor the birds.
The kids have been making sure that the technology works for starters, that the data is accurate, that it's communicating, and we'll be able to see if there's a penguin in the burrow or if the penguin's left by the temperature fall. All that will be accessible online for everyone to watch.
So that's nice, that's picking up quite a solid signal. There's a bit of a call.
Andrew Hornblow is an instrument technician who helped the students refine their idea. He says they've used a tiny data catcher to interface with the temperature probe.
That can measure to 1/16 of a degree centigrade, and it's factory calibrated. So it's a really neat piece of science equipment for $5, and we're adapting it to $5 worth of electronics on a breadboard with 3 AA batteries, and they can customise it, make it interactive.
Mr Hornblow says the devices, which include a radio transmitter that he's testing, are so simple the students can assemble them. Once in place, they can communicate with a computer in Uranui at the camp office, which captures the data for later use. Tyler Drought got involved via her school, Devon Intermediate.
Well, I got started for an enrichment at Devon, and then, it just led on from there.
Tell me about what you've learned.
Well, we've learned about the predators and what we've been doing, and the data catches and all the technology.
The project also gave her an excuse to stay up late.
We went on night surveys and we would bring a book down to catch data and their behaviour of what they would do.
And what did you observe?
They were quite, calm and just stare at you. Some were hiding under the rocks, which we saw 2 chicks. You could hear some squawking, and some would just walk around.
Her grandmother, Chris Hucker, has been impressed by the program.
I've sort of taken her down to some of the dropped her off at the night things, and I think it's been really good for her confidence and the fact that she's learning so much about little blue penguins.
It wasn't a style of learning she remembered experiencing. Did you ever get out and do these kind of projects when you were a young schoolgirl?
Certainly did not. We were in the classroom, and it would have been fantastic to be able to do things like this, be out and just learning about things, but rather than just out of textbook.
Elvisa van Leyden says little blue penguins are an important indicator species for measuring the health of the coastal environment. She says it's hoped the survey will offer clues to their dwindling numbers.
People used to find little blue penguins just hanging out on their porch at night, and they used to burrow under most people's batches in their holiday homes. And nowadays we don't see that so much. They're running out of places to live. So one of our jobs is to protect them by giving them almost like alternative housing, I guess, from all the development that's going on our coast. Yeah, because they're in national decline.
The Finding Little Blue project received $20,000 from the government's Curious Minds initiative and is electronically monitoring 14 boroughs around the Taranaki coast. It will begin live streaming its data at the end of the month. I ngā mutu mo te hōtaka o te ahi ponei, ko Robin Martinaho.
For this evening, don't forget you can check out our stories online.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. The Prime Minister says Kiwi Build has proved too big for one minister, and she appointed a collective of housing ministers in today's cabinet reshuffle. A man is dead after jumping into a river while running away from police in Bay of Plenty this afternoon. Victim Support is handing out the remaining money raised for the victims of the Christchurch mosque shootings, but some of the recipients are not happy. And the jury in the trial of two cousins accused of murdering a man in the Auckland suburb of Mangere will resume its deliberations tomorrow after 11 and a half hours without a verdict today. Our next news is at 7.
Take the pulse of the day's news every weeknight at 10.
Everybody who walks away from there knows from a security perspective there's no point coming after these guns because they're disabled, right?
Live with local, national and international stories and some music with your news.
We had the young people from He Waka Rotorua release their new album, Te Mahi Tamariki, an album that they did with Mara TK and Troy Kingi.